Hello and welcome to the Liverpool Transfer Daily. I'm joined by my fellow Liverpool.com writer James Martin to talk about the latest news. First, we're going to have to start off with Liverpool beginning their pre-season yesterday. We saw two new faces finally arriving at the club, one in Fabio Carvalho and the other in Ramsay. How excited are you to see them in action? And what we're feeling seeing them in Liverpool tops for the first time, sort of mixing with the Liverpool squad?
Yeah, it's always fun, isn't it? You start to get a feel of those little squad interactions for the first time. I think we saw Ramsay on the exercise bike next to Luis Diaz. Diaz was all smiles, and Ramsay looked very nervous, bless him. But it'll be fun to see him in particular in pre-season but given the nature of the role he's come in with, it may well be a while before we see him in a competitive fixture. So I think pre-season will be the main time where we really get to grips with the kind of player we've signed, get to have a proper look at him. As fans, that is, I'm sure the club will have done plenty of due diligence already, would have been watching a lot of him at Aberdeen. But yeah, for me personally, I'm excited to actually see him play. I'm sure we'll get some minutes in pre-season. Carvalho, yeah, really exciting. I think a lot of people have said it, but I think we may well see more of him than perhaps is expected in certain quarters this season. I mean, we know that he was very much a key component in that Fulham squad that went up from the Championship last season. He got a taster of Premier League action with them as well the season before, right towards the end of the campaign. So he's got more experience than perhaps you would give him credit for, given his age. Really exciting player. Pre-season's massive for him because I think probably he has a slightly less defined role than Ramsay, in the sense that Ramsay is the Trent Alexander-Arnold backup. Carvalho, I think it's what he makes of it, really. If he shines in pre-season, I mean, we've seen it with Elliott last year, then yeah, he could be starting from the start of the season if he wants to. He's got some very, very stiff competition. That's always going to be the case at Liverpool, but yeah, really exciting to see how he does in pre-season.
Yeah, and of course him and Elliott used to play together at Fulham's academy on a regular basis. I think they had a couple of seasons together in the team. We saw them sort of cozying up to each other. I think Elliott in the past has said he's one of his favourite players. So how much do you think Elliott will help him in sort of adjusting? Even though he is just slightly younger than Carvalho, how much do you think his presence will help him sort of to settle into that first team environment?
I'm sure it'll help in the first few weeks. You'd hope that as time goes by, he becomes just as comfortable with the whole dressing room. But it's always nice to have that familiar face, that point of contact. Like you say, first day there was some footage of them sort of gravitating towards each other, which I think is only natural. What will be interesting is whether we see that kind of link up on the pitch, or whether they're sort of competing for the same spots. It's hard to say with any certainty. The kind of whispers out of the club is that Carvalho's seen as an option for the attack, at least at first, and then might move back later on. But in pre-season, I think it's all a bit up in the air. Anything goes. I think we could see Klopp experimenting with all kinds of things, really. And yeah, so if they do get minutes together on the pitch, it will be interesting to see what that link up looks like.
And then with Calvin Ramsay, obviously, his idol, Trent Alexander-Arnold, was not quite there in the training pictures, but he will be joining the team later on. So I think, obviously, that's going to be something to look for in terms of him. He said he looks up to Trent, watched loads of clips of him to sort of practice his right-back skills, so to say. And now he'll get to see that firsthand. What are you expecting of him? What do you think is realistic to get out of him in this pre-season?
Yeah, I mean, from those who have watched him, it sounds like you can really see that in his game. You can see that he's idolised Trent Alexander-Arnold. There's there's some stylistic similarities there. There's most importantly for Liverpool, there is that kind of attacking impetus to get up the pitch and to cross from those dangerous areas. And he's not just a byline player. There's nothing wrong with that. We've seen Liverpool apply that to great effect on the left with Andy Robertson. but that's never been the extent of Alexander-Arnold's game. And I think Ramsay as well will have that in his locker in terms of being able to put in those deliveries from kind of different positions down that right flank. In terms of what we'll see in pre-season, I think he's probably going to just rotate in and out with Alexander-Arnold once they're both there. We've seen it before in pre-season, whether that's kind of 11 changes at half-time type thing or just one team one game, one team the next game. We've seen Klopp do both of those methods in the past, but I think we'll see a decent chunk of him, and yeah, he'll certainly be keen to impress Alexander-Arnold as much as anyone else. Of course, it's realistically he's not going to oust him from the team anytime soon, but he knew that when he joined. He knew the extent of the challenge, so he'll just be trying to soak in as much as possible and impress Jurgen Klopp as much as possible.
Yeah, and considering some of the first team players will be joining later, I think early next week or later this week. Obviously, there's only a week left now until Liverpool's first game in pre-season against Manchester United. So do you think there's a fair chance we'll see the less sort of established players, the likes of Carvalho and Ramsay, in that United game, and we'll probably see more of them than some of the first team players who were involved in the Nations League fixtures?
Yeah, I think that's likely. I think the plan is for everyone to be back later this week in time to fly out, so that the whole squad will be out in the Far East for the tour. But just because they're there, it doesn't necessarily mean they'll play. They won't have had much training at all. So, yeah, I do think it's likely that the ones who've had that solid week at the AXA Training Centre under their belts are going to get the nod for that United game, which, yeah, it's an exciting chance, isn't it? If you think about Ramsay, you think about Carvalho, it's not a bad debut to make, is it? It's only pre-season, of course, but it's still Liverpool against Manchester United. They'll be extra keen to make a good impression, and yeah, it's a golden chance to leave a lasting mark. I mean, Shaqiri, of course, he had that bicycle kick, didn't he, against United in a pre-season, and I think that bought him about a year's worth of credit with the fans. So yeah, if you do something impressive against United, regardless of the fixture, then you'll be buying a lot of credit in the bank with Liverpool fans.
Yeah, obviously, I think that sort of helped Shaqiri develop a habit of scoring against United in the end, because he did get a couple in, I think, Mourinho's final game for United as well. So, yeah, that would be interesting. But it's not just arrivals that we're going to be talking about. We're going to talk a little bit about Neco Williams, who is reportedly edging nearer an exit from Liverpool. It seems like Nottingham Forest is going to be the destination for him, which is somewhat of a surprise considering Fulham is the club he spent 6 months on loan at, and they also seemed interested. But it's going to be another newly promoted Premier League that he joins. What do you make of that?
Yeah, also surprised. I thought he would just go to Fulham. That seemed like the obvious move. They liked him there, but Liverpool will have had a figure in their head about what they wanted, and you can only assume that Nottingham Forest have got closer to that figure or be more willing to match it than Fulham. It makes sense from Julian Ward not to just pigeonhole him and say you're going to Fulham, because if he can get more elsewhere, it's a bit of a no-brainer, really, provided that he's happy with the move and everything. Yeah, it's two newly promoted teams, so from Williams' perspective, you can see it's a bit of a toss-up, really. I mean, he'll probably have had to look at it and thought, who has the better chance of succeeding in the Premier League. It's hard to say. I mean, on paper, possibly just about Fulham, but equally they've come up and gone straight back down again a couple of times in the last few seasons now. So it's not exactly the most glowing of track records. Nothing that will make him desperate to go there instead of Nottingham Forest. So fair play to him for keeping an open mind. I think it would be a very good acquisition for Nottingham Forest, to be honest. I think we saw in the Championship that Neco Williams is probably slightly above that level. Whether he'd ever be at Liverpool level, clearly the club have decided just about probably not, hence why Ramsay's through the door, and hence why they're sanctioning this sale. But I think he could easily do a job for that kind of bottom half Premier League team and do a very effective job at that. So yeah, I'm excited to see how he gets on. I don't think Liverpool need to necessarily put in anything like a buyback, but I think a sell-on clause would be shrewd, because, I mean, just from that Championship cameo alone, we saw how impressive he can be. The World Cup's coming up, where he's with Wales, so he could impress there. He's still very, very young as well. It's easy to forget because he's been in and around the Liverpool squad for so long. But I think he could become a very tidy player, even if that's not with Liverpool.
Yeah, I agree. I think obviously he's going to be playing against England at the World Cup, so plenty of opportunities to impress. And of course, Nottingham Forest have a bit of a Liverpool connection developing if Neco does go there, with Steve Cooper as the head coach and Tyler Avani as their leading forwards. So I wonder if we see a bit of a Williams crossing to Avani in the box sort of relationship develop next season, which will be, I think, exciting from a Liverpool perspective. But I think that about wraps it up for today. Thanks, James, for joining me. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in, and make sure to check out all the Blood Red content going out today. And we'll be covering the latest pre-season updates on Liverpool.com as well.